Shout out, shout out, shout out to the lads. Shout out, shout out, shout out to the lads. You clicked the title, you read the page. We are learning about the Port Arthur massacre. Now, thoughts and prayers. This seems like this is one of those very sensitive topics. I'm not sure if it's similar to something that we've dealt with in America. I don't really know much about it. One of the lads was like, "Yo, TT, do a reaction to it." But just by the title alone, it just sounds like it's one of those sensitive topics. I'm a sucker for history. I love history, all types of history. I used to be big on American history, still is big on American history. But now I just opened up my door to Australian history. So shout out to the lads. Hope you feeling good. Hope you feeling great. Get at that membership. Subscribe for the vibe. All that good stuff. Let's go.
Wins his ticket to Atlanta, and the former government defends its massive travel costs. Good evening. A siege is underway in the Tasmanian town of Port Arthur, where at least 25 people have been shot dead in Australia's worst massacre.
25 people in one time? That's a large number. That is a large number.
Another 26 are wounded. The gunman is holding police at bay. He's believed to be holding at least one person hostage. Most of the victims are reported to be tourists visiting the
What? He had folks hostage?
historic penal colony at Port Arthur, and a warning that some of the pictures in this report may be disturbing.
Helicopters began ferrying the injured to Hobart from Port Arthur after a gunman opened fire there this afternoon.
We've had a gunman run amok on the Port Arthur historic site. That's 85 k's from Hobart. Happened mid-afternoon. There are at least 12 confirmed dead, if not 22. There's a further 15 injured. At the moment we have a hostage-to-siege situation which we're attempting to contain and control.
The convict ruins are a favourite with interstate and overseas tourists. It's understood those visitors have made up the bulk of those killed or wounded. Locals near the site cringed in fear inside their shops and homes as the gunman opened fire.
Everyone's just freaked out.
What do you understand he may have done?
Kill lots of people.
Any idea why?
No idea.
Any idea who he was?
No idea. Not a local, I don't think.
Do you know if any tourists have been involved?
Yes, there have been.
Oh, it just sounds awful.
It is awful. It's very, very awful.
A few minutes ago, reports put the death toll at 25 dead. Some of those killed apparently incinerated in a car near the ruin.
And that's messed up because at that point, like, people can't even really shoot back because in Australia, like, I'm guessing guns wasn't a big thing. Or is this the reason why guns aren't a big thing? Did this lead to why guns aren't a big thing?
Another 15 people have been badly injured. It's understood the siege has now moved to a cottage on the site, the armed man apparently holding one, possibly more hostages. Police have surrounded the cottage as Special Operations Group officers continue negotiations. It's understood the gunman is a 22-year-old armed with a machine gun. What sparked the massacre isn't known at this stage. Special police hotlines have been set up for people who fear for the safety of relatives. The numbers are 002 302 519 or 002 302 516. Steve Kerry, 7 Nightly News.
Welcome to Sunrise. I'm Chris Barr.
And I'm Peter Ford. We'll cross to Hobart shortly and speak to 7 Network correspondent Adam Walters, who is at Royal Hobart Hospital.
And later we'll talk to some of the survivors of Sunday's massacre. But first up this morning, the man believed responsible for Australia's worst mass murder this century is sedated and under police guard in a hospital. Police say they expect to talk to him later this morning when charges can be laid.
The first of the names of those slaughtered at Port Arthur are being released. Among them, 55-year-old Mervyn Howard and his wife Mary from the tiny village of Dunstown near Ballarat.
So he would just pop in old people? Like, what was wrong with him? Like, what?
In central Victoria. Well respected in the local community, they were avid churchgoers. He was the secretary of the Ballarat Football League for 14 years. They leave behind 5 children. Mervyn and Mary's killer lies under police guard in Royal Hobart Hospital, the same hospital in which many of his victims are still being treated. Shortly after lunch on Sunday, 28-year-old Martin Bryant systematically mowed down tourists at Port Arthur. 32 were dead by the time he reached the Seascape Guest Lodge, a bed and breakfast 5 kilometres north of the penal colony. Its 2 owners were held hostage, along with a third man earlier forced into the boot of a BMW.
Yo, how does one man do all of this? Nah, this is wow.
The car was later set alight. The gunman, who was armed with several high-powered rifles, continued to shoot at police. They tried to negotiate with him until his phone battery ran out.
Our principle at the moment is to keep the house isolated and the people in it contained within the site. And we're hoping to open negotiations again. They've broken down because of some technical problems.
Special Operations Police surrounded the house, lying in wait until dawn. Then at 8 a.m, the seascape burst into flames.
The upstairs portion of it is on fire, and there are flames coming from partly down on the lower level on part of it. It's starting to slowly spread, I understand. There are still shots being fired, so at this stage I've given instructions that none of our personnel are to approach the house.
30 minutes after the blaze began, Martin Bryant fled the house, his clothes ablaze. He was arrested on the spot. His hostages could not escape the flames.
The person has been taken into police custody, conveyed to the Royal Hobart Hospital, suffering from burns, no gunshot wounds.
The killer was taken by ambulance to Hobart Hospital.
Yo, he look young. Nah, what happened to his life that made him end up doing all of this to these people?
Under police guard and with his head covered. He'll appear in court as soon as doctors allow. Later in the day, police escorted media along the path of the rampage.
I think carnage is the simple way to describe it. It's probably the only single word that I know that would describe what was experienced in there.
The guest lodge still smouldered late into the day. Police have uncovered the remains of 2 of the hostages. They're still looking for the third. Their deaths bring to 35 the number killed. 18 were injured. 4 have been discharged. 5 people are now off the critical list. Sue Stevenson, 7 News.
Joining us now live from the Royal Hobart Hospital, 7 Network.
Damn, man, he was going after tourists. I don't know, lads. That's kind of scary.
Correspondent Adam Walters. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Peter.
What's Martin Bryant's condition this morning?
Well, he's believed to be serious but stable. He's been under constant watch overnight under that very tight police guard in an isolated wing of the hospital. There had been some concern from the relatives of his alleged victims that he was in fact in the same building, but hospital management tells us he's well away from the people still in hospital after the weekend shootings, and he's been undergoing assessment from psychologists and surgeons alike.
When are charges likely to be laid against him, Adam?
Well, police are very anxious to lay charges quickly because of all the publicity. They're very conscious of not jeopardising his chances of a fair trial, and that seems to have been dashed already here in Hobart. The local newspaper this morning, Judge and Jury, already making up its mind. There's nothing ambiguous about this headline or the photo. Despite attempts yesterday to cover his head when he was admitted to the hospital, identification has already become a real legal issue and is causing police a great deal of concern. Now, they hope to charge him with at least 2 of the murders today so they can have him remanded in custody.
Oh, I'm about to say, okay, they're gonna charge him with more, but they just saying today we're gonna just try to charge him with 2. Cause I'm like, 35 folks done passed away, sir. That 2 ain't enough.
And get on with the huge task of preparing a brief for all 35 murders. Now, it's likely it will be a bedside court hearing, that he will not be well enough to leave the hospital to appear in the Hobart court.
Adam, what do you hear about the survivors?
Well, the survivors, as that report mentioned, a lot have been released. There were 5 on the critical list. They're yet to be interviewed by police. Among those to be spoken to by detectives, those who came face to face with the alleged gunman. With the dead outnumbering the survivors 2 to 1, there aren't many who can tell police exactly what happened at Port Arthur. Those who can have told of how they'll be haunted by their narrow escapes. Hobart woman Karen Jones said tourists thought the sound of gunfire was part of some historic reenactment at the infamous penal settlement.
It was just like a cannon going off. We thought it was all part of the show. We were going down to check out what was going on, you know. Thought it might have been a little bit of extra on the sides.
She said we was going down there to check it out. You don't know what a gun... Even if you've never been in a situation, you know what a gunshot sound like. Like, it don't matter what the situation is. You just know. And you know not to go toward it. She probably, at the heat of the moment, like, but even still.
So like you get the tours around there, and we thought they were letting off cannons. And
her boyfriend, Philip Milburn, says the shooting was not as random as initially reported.
I mean, if we walked past him and we went the other way and he went to the shop, I think, well, if he got out of the car and started shooting straight away, well, we might have been the first, maybe.
The shock of their encounter with the gunman was still setting in as they recounted the panic of the scramble to safety.
A pregnant lady, Karen, she was there. She just couldn't stop vomiting. She was sort of panicky. There was an old guy upstairs. He'd lost his wife. He couldn't find her, but they found her downstairs.
He just because he couldn't get downstairs. Too many people, and everyone sort of passed the message on. They found her.
So there would have been people in there who may have lost loved ones who didn't know what had happened to their loved ones.
Easy.
Among the others facing danger, helicopter pilots, forced to fly through gunfire during the airlift of casualties.
Well, I was requested by the paramedic to fly as low as possible, which is not an unusual situation, as we normally get involved in that type of accident or in people with chest injuries. We are used to that, and sometimes, luckily yesterday the weather was not a problem, so we were able to comply with that request, and we came all the way below 1,000 feet.
Hospital staff have been praised for the way they coped with the emergency, management denying rumours that some nurses refused to treat the gunman. Adam Walters, 7 News.
And Adam, what are we hearing about the council?
Yeah, the nurses was like, we don't want to treat this scumbag. This lad that took a lot of people out. No.
Counselling for the survivors and also their relatives.
Well, teams of counsellors have been flying in from interstate. That job is a mammoth task, almost as big as the job that the police have at hand after a relentless weekend. The police have to interview 180 witnesses. That's going to take quite some time. I think after the court appearance today, it could be 3 weeks before we'll see him before a magistrate again.
Thanks, Adam. We'll come back to you later on in Sunrise. 7 Network correspondent Adam Walters joining us live from Royal Hobart Hospital.
The massacre has again renewed the debate over gun laws. Prime Minister John Howard says he'll push for a
Uh-oh, here we go. Here's getting juicy.
national gun register when he meets with federal and state police ministers next month.
These are the weapons of destruction that are all too easily available in Australia. The horror of the Port Arthur slaughter has prompted emotional pleas for tighter gun laws to control their use.
There is absolutely no right to bear arms in the community. There is a right to community safety, and we're seeing that right to safety completely disregarded while politicians cower in fear of what the gun lobby can do to their electoral hopes.
Prime Minister John Howard responded immediately, bringing forward a meeting of state and federal police ministers to Friday week to implement uniform national gun laws.
There is no legitimate interest served, in my view, by the free availability.
I just feel like certain guns should be banned because it's like, why you need a sniper? It's like, why you need a certain gun? Like, if you want to bear arms, get a handgun. You know what I'm saying? What you need? Extended clip and all that. Like, what you need all of that for? Come on now. You got the right to bear arms, not the right to bear arms upon where you can go to war with the government. Because it's like, at some point, why you need all of that firearm? It's just ridiculous.
In this country of weapons of this kind.
While the federal government banned the import of semi-automatic weapons in 1991, one major stumbling block remains. The Commonwealth does not have the constitutional power to impose national gun laws on the states. But Mr Howard says this time he won't brook any opposition.
I will not retreat an inch from the national responsibilities I have in relation to this whole issue, not an inch.
We've got to get it done and get it done in the right way.
And the signs today are that the states will finally fall into line.
I believe that the public of urgent and immediate reaction.
A national response, a national approach, a national solution is required.
But the gun lobby is continuing to resist.
I have no problem with all the states having the same gun laws. What I do have a problem is with the government in Canberra trying to take control of those things which are, at the moment, the rights of the sovereign states.
In Canberra, Glenn Milne, 7 News.
Federal Parliament officially resumes today, and the man with the job of keeping MPs in line is Victorian Liberal Bob Halverson, the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. He defeated 5 other candidates for the job, including long-serving National Party MP Ian Sinclair.
The Liberal Party met Neil Andrew, Lou Lieberman.
The murders today, if they can.
Any indication at all of what the alleged gunman is like?
The National Party's Ian Sinclair.
There we go. Had to catch us back up. They went off track.
Other Liberal candidates included Neil Andrew, Lou Lieberman, Kathy Sullivan and the outspoken Wilson Tuckey. Today's opening of the Parliament will be a ceremonial occasion, but the government has signalled it will move quickly on the partial sale of Telstra and introduce the legislation later in the week. The government estimates the legislation will then come before the Senate in
Port Arthur massacre. He's under guard in the Royal Hobart Hospital. Also at the hospital this morning, our reporter Adam Walters. Good morning, Adam, again.
Good morning, Chris.
Now, do we have any indication at all of what the alleged gunman is like?
Well, apparently he's been quite lucid and talking to police overnight. The extent to which detectives have interrogated him, for want of a better word, about the weekend shootings is not known at this stage, although police are very anxious to lay charges as soon as possible because of the widespread publicity the shootings have been attracting.
Do we know what police will be doing today?
Yes, they'll continue to interview witnesses, and that's proving to be a mammoth task. 180 witnesses to interview over all 35 murders. It's going to take some time. At this stage, we believe they're planning to charge him with at least 2 of the murders today, if they can, if his condition allows proceedings to go ahead. Now, if they can have him remanded in custody at what is likely to be a bedside court hearing, they'll then have at least 3 weeks to prepare a thorough brief on all 35 murders.
And just finally, some of his alleged victims are in the hospital with him. What's their condition this morning?
Well,
Yo, imagine you get popped and now you're being treated in the same hospital with the dude that popped you. That's insane.
He hasn't been lost on anybody, but the hospital management has been very anxious to assure relatives of the people still in the hospital that the alleged gunman is in an isolated wing of the hospital under a very tight police guard. They're watching his every movement just about. He's been under constant surveillance after the weekend's alleged activities. There's no way that he can be underestimated in terms of security. And I guess to an extent, the police are there to protect him. Emotions are running very high here in Hobart. It's really starting to sink in. At first, there was stunned disbelief. You can really feel the anger starting to boil.
All right, Adam, we'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay.
Adam Walters reporting live from the Royal Hobart Hospital.
Police say the names of those 34 victims of the Port Arthur massacre may be released today. They have now determined the origins of all but 6 of the dead, including 2 Malaysians.
Slowly, details are emerging about Martin Bryant.
Yo, he looked like just a screw up, like his whole life. Like, you know how they say some kids are blessings? No. He looked like he was born a demon. Like, for real.
The man arrested and being held in police custody in hospital. The picture taking shape is that of an introverted loner, prone to violent and unpredictable mood swings. His condition apparently worsened after he was badly injured in a car crash which claimed the life of the woman who'd taken him in and cared for him. Soon after that, Bryant's father committed suicide, and mental health experts are now suggesting this accelerated a downhill slide into a dark world that exploded in Port Arthur.
Yo, I hate when these doctors be trying to just throw that whole mental health word. Nah, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. Like, you see how they just said, oh, he lost someone that cared for him. He didn't know how to handle grief, and he turned into a psychopath. Okay, there's no mental health issue there. Okay, you just didn't know how to handle grief. Lock him up for the rest of his life.
On Sunday.
There's the gunshots.
Of the 34 people Bryant is alleged to have gunned down, 12 were from Victoria, 9 from Tasmania, 4 were from New South Wales, 1 from South Australia, and there were 2 visitors from Malaysia. A third Asian man of Indian appearance is also among the dead, along with one of the hostages and 4 others who police say had no identification papers. Another person, believed to be one of the owners of the bed and breakfast establishment, is still unaccounted for. It seems certain that one outcome of the Port Arthur tragedy will be swift moves to make gun laws uniformly stricter across the nation. Particularly targeted will be military-style high-powered automatic weapons, such as those used by the Port Arthur killer.
There is no legitimate interest served, in my view, by the free availability in this country of weapons of this kind.
The Prime Minister backed his stand with action. As a matter of urgency, he's brought forward a meeting of state and federal police ministers to implement uniform national gun laws. And although Canberra has no specific powers to bring in federal controls, Mr Howard has vowed to use all his political clout to finally get action on this contentious issue.
We will not retreat an inch from the national responsibilities I have in relation to this whole issue, not an inch.
Other gun critics want to go even further than just controlling one sector of the weapons market.
There is absolutely no right to bear arms in the community. There is a right to community safety.
Shows that the states look set to fall into line this time in a positive move to make events like Port Arthur more difficult to occur in the future. Malcolm Weatherup, 7 News.
News of the Port Arthur tragedy has swamped the British media and caused fears of a tourism backlash. But experts say British sympathy is with Australia.
Yeah, because I'm looking at Australia like, dang, why he was trying to clap all the tourists? Like, what's up? They don't like tourists in Australia? Let me know.
And any fall in tourist figures will be short-lived.
Only a month after the tragedy of Dunblane, and the British were reeling in horror with news of Port Arthur.
It was the worst gun massacre ever.
Saturation coverage here, but is this and the intense interest in the backpacker serial murders destroying Australia's image as the dream destination? British tourism experts say any drop...
Oh, they call Australia the dream destination? Ooh, I like that. That sounds like I'm going to have a good time.
Off will only be temporary.
It's understandable that for maybe 48 hours, maybe even a week after a tragic incident like Dunblane or the incident in Tasmania, people will, out of sympathy, just simply decide not to travel to that place.
Also, the Australian Tourism Commission took the step of issuing a statement to Britain's media today saying Australia was still a safe and secure place to visit. But there were signs of nervousness. This Tasmanian tourism campaign ran in the weekend press. Out of respect, it was quickly abandoned today, but the press coverage certainly didn't slow down.
Tonight, terror in Tasmania. After Dunblane, another lone gunman, another mass murder of the innocent.
Talkback TV and newspaper debates, all from a country that knows better than any other what Australia is going through. In London, Chris Reason, 7 News.
No words can express the horror and disbelief in this little...
That's messed up.
...Tasmanian tourist centre tonight. Port Arthur, town of crisis, of wounded crowded into hospitals, of police desperately trying to piece the massacre together, and of families shattered by tragedy.
Yes, less than 36 hours after the gunman went on an indiscriminate rampage, the death toll stands at 35. The worst massacre by a single civilian in world history. The killer himself is in hospital with some of his victims. He was captured, his clothes ablaze, as he ran from a burning building.
The horrific massacre at the historic penal settlement began without warning.
Just the gunshots.
Having murdered 32 unsuspecting local residents and tourists, the snipers stopped at a bed and breakfast lodge 5 kilometres north of the convict settlement and took 3 hostages, a couple in their 70s and a man who was earlier forced into the boot of a BMW and driven to the guest house. That car was later gutted by fire. Inside the Seascape Lodge, the man, armed with several high-powered rifles, continued firing at police, who were trying to negotiate by phone.
Our principle at the moment is to keep the house isolated and the people in it contained within the site, and we're hoping to open negotiations again. They've broken down because of some technical problems. A battery, I understand, and a phone that he had in the house ran out.
Has power to the
It's
house
as simple as that.
Victorian Special Operations Group police flew in to surround the house.
He said it's as simple as that. That didn't sound like near another simple. Like, what? He put y'all through a standoff. It was hostages. After he just popped people, it wasn't nothing simple about that.
Where they lay in wait until dawn.
It's a pretty horrific sight for my people in there at the moment, and it'll take quite some time to work through this. So I just hope you bear with us and give us a little bit of room to move.
What about the number of injured?
What's the chance of the death toll being much higher than what it already is?
Well, it's very difficult to say. It's dark in there at the moment, and as I said, my people are trying to work through the site and locate anybody that has been killed other than the ones we've already found.
Then, at 8 this morning, police were taken aback when they saw the Seascape Lodge burst into flames.
The upstairs portion of it is on fire, and there are flames coming from partly down the on the lower level on part of it. It's starting to slowly spread, I understand. There are still shots being fired, so at this stage I've given instructions that none of our personnel are to approach the house.
30 minutes after the fire began, the gunman himself walked out of the cottage, his own clothes on fire. He was immediately arrested by heavily armed Special Operations Police.
A person has been taken into police custody, conveyed to the Royal Albert Hospital, suffering from burns, no gunshot wounds.
The killer was taken by ambulance to a Hobart hospital. Under police guard, his head covered. He was wheeled into casualty and will face court as soon as his doctors allow. For 2 hours today, police escorted us to see the results of the killer's rampage. The house where his 3 hostages died was still smouldering. Having arrested the gunman, aged in his late 20s, police soon realised there were no survivors.
I feel bad for those old people. They probably was trying to talk some sense into him the whole time. Like, yo, chill. I feel so bad. So sad.
I was in the house. It burnt to the ground, leaving only the chimney and iron veranda post standing. The 3 hostages who died inside the cottage take the unbelievable death toll to 35, Australia's worst shooting massacre.
I think carnage is the simple way to describe it. It's probably the only single word that I know that would describe what was experienced in there.
The tourist region will reopen to the public in the next few days. The sudden and appalling slaughter now added to the region's already dark history. At Port Arthur, Dean Allen Craig, 7 Nightly News.
This afternoon, news cameras were allowed back into the convict ruins to follow the trail of tragedy left by the gunman. Darren Linton joined the convoy through the Port Arthur killing fields.
The lone gunman, armed with a high-powered semi-automatic rifle...
We thought the site must have been... Alright, y'all subscribe for the vibe, man. Thoughts and prayers. That is crazy.